Hello, my name is Greg Hayes. I developed the Minnesota Truck Weight Education Program, which is now in its 19th year, providing information and understanding of Minnesota's truck weight regulations to the industry, to road authorities, and to enforcement. As a former State Patrol commercial vehicle regional supervisor and a former truck driver, I saw firsthand a need to compile the regulations into a format that everyone could understand. We continue to train thousands of people on the current and updated regulations, and on a yearly basis provide free classes at statewide locations. This year, because of the COVID-19 virus, our classes needed to be postponed. Unfortunately, this came at a time where classes would have provided some new legislative information. Until we can resume classes, my goal, along with training coordinator Tom Nelson, is to provide an abbreviated presentation which addresses the most requested information based on our program and technical support calls. The following slides offer a short introduction to topics which may be helpful to those who need guidance in the most popular areas of the classroom presentation. Some of these areas include forest products, construction materials, agricultural products, which was recently renamed qualifying products by the legislature. This presentation in no way takes the place of regular classroom training, but is only intended as a temporary tool to assist those who have taken or will take the classes when we resume. Some slides will contain Minnesota statutes highlighted in a little box on the slide. If you wish more statute guidance, that would be the law. Thanks for being part of our training success. There will be contact information for additional support help embedded in the presentation. We'll look forward to seeing you in the classrooms. Meanwhile, from Keith, Paul, Tom, and myself, stay healthy, stay safe. The Minnesota Truck Weight Education Program is funded by the Department of Transportation, managed by the Center for Transportation Studies at the University of Minnesota, and currently presented through the Alexandria Technical and Community College. Almost yearly, there have been legislative changes to truck weight limits. In the last few years, there have been gross weight increases beyond the normal 80,000 pound legal weight to as much as 97,000 pounds. These increases come only with permission or a permit from the local road authority. In turn, when these local road authorities grant these permissions, the local road authority is usually looking at the police department or the sheriff's department to enforce these new permissions. It's asking law enforcement to monitor the permits, and as a result, more and more local departments are getting involved in truck weight regulations. In addition to the normal criminal weights, Minnesota has a relevant evidence law where properly trained law enforcement staff can review the weight records for evidence of overweight loads. The law requires specific documentation on the weight tickets, which gives exact evidence to verify the vehicle and the weight. The current look back is 14 days. No search warrant is required for this look back. Currently, the normal gross weight on a highway in Minnesota, unless posted to a lower weight limit, is 80,000 pounds. The old gross weight of 73,280 for vehicles with 5 axles on 9-ton roads was eliminated. All axle weight limits must be legal and bridge postings must be observed. With this legislation wording, you could, in theory, have a gross weight of 80,000 pounds on a 5-ton road if all of the axle weights were legal for 5-ton axle limits. Road authorities have the ability to post roads and bridges as needed for safe transportation and to prevent road damage. Minnesota is a 10-ton state. All paved roads are considered 10-ton unless posted otherwise. This means a maximum gross weight of 80,000 pounds, and no individual axle, either by itself or within a group, can exceed 20,000 pounds. Minnesota also has 9-ton roads, either by a sign or by statute. By law, all non-paved roads, unless posted to a lower limit or during spring load restrictions, are considered 9-ton roads. A maximum gross weight of 80,000 pounds is still allowed, but no individual axle, either by itself or in a group, can exceed 18,000 pounds. Shown is an example of a gravel 9-ton road. No sign is needed during normal times of the year, as by statute, it is a 9-ton road. Here is an example of a paved road, which would normally be a 10-ton road, but it's posted to 9-ton limits. There's very little difference in axle group weights between a 9 and a 10-ton road. For example, both allow tandem weights of 34,000 pounds and a maximum gross weight of 80,000 pounds. Another example, this time of a paved Becker County road, which is posted to 9-ton, but it also restricts the gross weight to 73,280. 80,000 pounds would be illegal on this route, even if the axle loads were legal. This is the Minnesota weight limit chart made from Minnesota Statute 169.824, which governs how much weight is allowed on axle groups. The distances on the left is the measurement in feet between axle centers. We're not talking about a wheelbase here. When a measurement of 6 inches is reached, you're allowed by law to go to the next foot, except in the 8 plus column in red. An 8 plus is a measurement that is over 8 feet but less than 9 feet. In the 8 plus, you cannot round up to 9 feet, a measurement which would be 8 feet 6 inches. That would still be 8 plus. To find the maximum allowable, which is not necessarily the legal weight, of a truck, you need to measure the distance between all axles on the truck to every other axle on the truck, and they must all be in compliance with the weights on this chart. An example would be a 3-axle gravel truck designed as a steering axle and 2 drive axles known as a tandem. If you measured the distance from the center of axle 1, which would be the steering axle, to the last drive axle, which would be axle 3, and you had a measurement of 23 feet 7 inches, you could round that measurement up to 24 feet. Now go down the column on the left side of the chart to 24 feet, and then across to the right to the 3-axle column, and you would find a weight of 54,000 pounds. That would be the maximum allowable weight. In this case, to achieve that, you would need 20,000 pounds on the steering axle, meaning you'd have to have the correct size and ratings, and then 34,000 pounds on the rear. That same format for finding the maximum allowable weight can be used on trucks and trailers. These charts are laminated and included in the classroom training. Though this doesn't show every possible measurement between axles, for example, it doesn't show the distance between axles 2 through 5 as a unique measurement, its intent is to show that all axles and measurements need to be considered and calculated into the weight chart to know if the weights are compliant. We currently have a truck weight calculator and soon hope to have a video to show you how to use that, which will allow you to program all of these measurements and distances into a calculator and get the exact maximum allowable weights. This information is from Minroad in Minnesota and shows it doesn't take twice the weight to do twice the road damage. For example, only a 20% weight increase, or 3,600 pounds, on a single 9-ton axle does over 2 times the damage as a legally loaded 9-ton axle. For a tandem axle, and a tandem is 2 axles spaced over 40 inches and up to 96 inches, a 20% increase, which would be 6,800 pounds, over the legal load of 34,000 pounds causes 2.25 times the damage of a legally loaded tandem axle. Most people know the maximum legal weight of a truck is 80,000 pounds, but it's important to remember that within that weight there are regulations also on axles, wheels, and tires. We've covered axle weights, but also wheels have regulation. A wheel weight is half of the axle weight, so for a 9-ton road where 18,000 pounds would be the axle weight, the wheel weight is 9,000 pounds. On a 10-ton road, where the axle weight would be 20,000 pounds, the wheel weight would be 10,000 pounds. It's possible to be over on a wheel weight without being over on an axle if the load is heavy to one side. In addition, there are tire weight regulations. In Minnesota, and it's not the same in every state. The steering axle, which would be the foremost axle, and the rearmost steering axle, if applicable, cannot exceed 600 pounds per inch of tire surface. And that inch of tire surface is taken from the sidewall of the tire, or the tire rating, whichever is less. On non-steering tires, Minnesota allows 500 pounds per inch of tire surface, again based on the size of the sidewall of the tire, or the manufacturer's rating, whichever is less. The rating is also on the tire. You would never know the legal weight of a tire until you know both what it's allowed by size and what it's allowed by rating. The legal weight of the tire would be the lesser of those two. This is an example of a single axle. On a 9-ton road, this axle would be allowed 18,000 pounds. On a 10-ton road, this axle would be allowed 20,000 pounds, providing the tires had enough size and rating. Axles which are not spaced beyond 40 inches are counted as a single axle as far as weight is concerned. The second axle is not disregarded, as there are cases where the axles are needed in multiple groups. However, the load on any two axles spaced 40 inches or less cannot exceed the single axle load limit for the highway it's on. Sometimes axles are intentionally spaced less than 40 inches. They're not needed for additional weight, but they do make the ride smoother for the contents of the trailer. Note only about 32 inches center to center from the previous slide. These trailers are normally on small enclosed trailers or boat trailers, small campers, or portable fish houses. This is a 6-axle straight truck with 3 cast-ring lift axles. Overall length 24 feet 3 inches for a maximum allowable weight of 68,500 pounds. It has 385 millimeter steering axle tires. The last 5 axles are spaced 14 feet 3 inches, which is allowed 57,000 pounds. Again, the 5-axle spacing is 14 feet 3 inches, which allows 57,000 pounds by the gross weight chart. If there is 34,000 pounds on the rear drive axles, which are axles 4 and 5 in this group, that leaves only 23,000 pounds for the 3 steering axle tags, if loaded to the maximum. It doesn't matter that these pusher axles are closer than 40 inches. They're needed to add to the group weight of 57,000 pounds without needing full individual axle load limit. There is 36 inches between each of these 3 axles. Each axle has a single 8.5 inch tire, which would allow 8,500 pounds per axle based on the tire size. But they only need to weigh about 6,500 pounds per axle, which is far less than a single axle load of 18,000 pounds on a 9-ton or 20,000 pounds on a 10-ton road. Again, it doesn't hurt these 2 axles to be less than 40 inches when this situation occurs. This is a larger vehicle with axle spacings beyond 40 inches in the entire group. This is a longer box, so the company may have wanted to keep axles beyond 40 inches in the event they wanted more weight per single axle on this truck. It could also possibly allow more weight on the last 5-axle group. A wheel is defined as 2 or more tires with centers less than 48 inches apart on an axle. You'll probably know them as a dual. On a 9-ton route, a tire would be allowed 9,000 pounds. On a 10-ton route, the maximum tire load would be 10,000 pounds. Wheels are what normally is weighed on portable scales. Normally this is thought of as a dual, but in statute it's a wheel. On a 9-ton road, this wheel would be allowed 9,000 pounds. On a 10-ton road, it would be allowed 10,000 pounds. This is half of the axle weight. If someone is maximizing their single axle weight, it's important that the load be balanced. It would be possible to be over on a wheel weight without being over on an axle load. For example, on a 10-ton route, one wheel could weigh 8,000 pounds and the other 12,000 pounds. The axle load is legal at 20,000 pounds, but the 12,000 pound wheel weight is in violation by 2,000 pounds. Wheels are what's normally weighed on scales. The sum of the wheels is the axle weight. The sum of the axle weights is the gross weight. Weighing on level ground is essential to get accurate wheel weights. Highways are normally crowned with super elevation to allow water to run to the shoulders. Weighing on road shoulders would give accurate axle weights, but not necessarily wheel weights due to the crown in the road. This is an example of a Haney scale showing a wheel load of approximately 10,400 pounds. If this were on a 10-ton road, there would be a 400-pound violation. If it were on a 9-ton road, it would be a 1,400-pound violation. Here shows a wheel load of 14,700 pounds. If in Minnesota, on a 10-ton road, it would be overweight by 4,700 pounds. This photo would probably indicate both a possible wheel load violation and a load securement or leaking load violation. A closer look at this slide indicates an obvious leaking load violation and also reason to question whether or not the wheel might be overweight. Super singles or new generation wide base tires are legal as long as they have adequate size and tire rating. There are cost savings in weight, but there are issues if you have a flat tire. Shown here is an example where one properly sized and rated tire can replace two dual tires. If you have a flat tire using a single tire, it must be repaired at the location. Minnesota tire weight law allows 600 pounds per inch of tire surface for a steering axle. A steering can be the foremost and rearmost. If there are multiple axles that steer or pivot or caster, it's only the foremost and rearmost which are allowed 600 pounds per inch. All other axle tires are 500 pounds per inch. In both cases, the legal weight of the tire is the lesser of what the tire is allowed by size or what it's allowed by rating. In no case can you exceed the rated weight of a tire. Here is a quick reference chart used for determining the weight of tires only by size. The bottom of the chart is a metric conversion. This chart is part of the handout material at the classroom presentations. This example shows that the first and the last axles are steering axles. Those two axles would be allowed 600 pounds per inch of tire. If the pusher axle, which is axle number 2 in this photo, also pivoted or steered, it would not be allowed the 600 pounds per inch as it's not the rearmost. The number 11 shows the tire size on the side of the tire. It means 11 inches. The 22.5 is the rim diameter, not the size. This is the tire rating. Notice how it differs if the tire is used as a single or a dual. Ratings cannot be exceeded. No one will give you permission to haul more weight on the tire than was intended by the manufacturer when it was built due to civil liability. If you exceed the rated weight, and it's documented as a result of a vehicle inspection by law enforcement, the vehicle is considered out of service. This is an example of a tire rated in kilograms. To convert kilograms to pounds, just multiply the kilograms by 2.2, which will give you the weight in pounds. The 425 millimeter tire shown here needs to be converted to inches before being multiplied by the pounds per inch, depending if it's a steering or non-steering tire. To convert the millimeters to inches, simply divide the millimeters by 25.4. In this example, the 295 is equal to 11.61 inches. That is the number you would use to multiply by the 500 or 600 depending on the location of the tire on the vehicle. The tire chart handout gives you a rounded version of this conversion at the bottom of the chart as a quick reference. Do not round these numbers as you do the distances on the axle chart. For example, 11.61 inches is not 12 inches. The tire chart showing conversions and quick references are part of the classroom handouts. Again, in addition to gross weight, axles have limits depending on the road tonnage they're on, wheels have limits, and tires have weight limits. The first thing needed to compute legal weight of multiple axle vehicles is to have the measurements from center of axle to center of axle between all axles on the vehicle. Not just the first and last axle, but all internal measurements also. Once those measurements are known, they are plugged into the weight table and you can determine the maximum allowable weight for that configuration. This is the axle weight chart explained earlier, and is where you go to calculate the allowable weights depending on the distances between axles. The classroom demonstrates an online truck weight calculator, where configurations can also be calculated. When the word tandem is used, it reflects distances over 40 inches. 40 inches or less is considered one axle, as we talked about before. Up to 96 inches, which is 8 feet. Over 8 feet is no longer considered a tandem. There are, depending on the road weight limits, increases when axles are spread beyond 8 feet. For example, on a 10-ton road, two axles spaced 9 feet apart with correct tire size and ratings could gross 39,000 pounds with proper weight distribution. However, on a 9-ton road, the same two axles spaced at the same distances would only be allowed 35,000 pounds. This is an example of one of the few differences between a 9 and a 10-ton road limit. Minnesota has a statute which says no more than 4 axles are allowed on a single unit, either by itself or in combination, unless the additional axles steer or caster. In this example, axles 1, 2, and 7 steer, so it's in compliance. The maximum gross weight in Minnesota at normal times of the year is 80,000 pounds. Weights above 80,000 pounds must have some authority to do so, such as a statute which allows it. An example would be the winter load increase. Or else the vehicle must have a legal permission to exceed 80,000 pounds, such as a permit. Minnesota has a maximum drawbar length of 15 feet. This law can, in some circumstances, cause a reduction in gross weight as the distance required for maximum consecutive axle loads cannot be attained due to the shortened distances by the drawbar. Though a normal tandem can, by itself, weigh 34,000 pounds, in this case the 22-foot length between axles 2 and 5 is allowed by the chart only 57,000 pounds. One tandem could weigh 34,000 pounds, but the other would be limited to 23,000 pounds, or the 57,000 pounds would be exceeded. If both tandems weighed 34,000 pounds, it would result in an overweight on the last 4 axles of 11,000 pounds. Proper weight calculation requires the ability to calculate the distances between all axle centers, and then look at the gross weight chart to determine the maximum allowable weight for those distances. This is an example of all the measurements which must be taken to find the legal weight of the truck and the maximum limits of all of the axle groups. During the winter, when roads are frozen in specific areas of the state, Minnesota statute allows up to a 10% increase in normal weights on unrestricted roads and bridges. Due to the different climates within the state, the increases are implemented at different times in different areas of the state depending on a freeze index for that area. It's no longer a specific date. The zones of the state are set by the Commissioner of Transportation, as are the implementation dates. These are the different load limit zones within the state. Be careful to monitor your entire route before using this increase. It may be possible to load in an area where the increase is in effect, but the destination may be in an area where the increase is not yet in effect. Getting current information is easy, either by email or by phone. If you subscribe to the email updates, these updates are immediate and up to date. If you operate with the 10% winter load increase, a permit is needed only when operating on the interstate highways. The permit fee is $60 and it can be obtained from the Minnesota Department of Transportation's website. A permit is not needed on other roadways. Also make sure you increase your registration, your license plate weight, to cover the increase if necessary. If a road is posted with a physical sign, the sign overrules the 10% and no axle increases are allowed. An unposted 9-ton road, such as an unpaved gravel road, would get the increases. It's possible to haul over the normal 80,000 pounds on a posted 9-ton road as long as the axle weight limits don't exceed the 9-ton limits. Restricted road postings refer to axle, not gross weights. So for example, a permit load may be allowed the increased gross weight, but only if the axle loads complied with the posted limits. This is an example of a posted paved road to 9-ton axle limits. During the winter load increase, you could haul over 80,000 pounds up to the 10% maximum of 88,000 pounds, but only if the axle groups did not exceed the 9-ton axle limits. During the winter load increase, posted bridge weights do not increase and must be honored at their posted limits. Note this posting is for gross weight. The 5-ton limit is effective all year round. No increases here. An example of a bridge issue. Another example of a failed bridge, possibly a bridge posting violation. Many of the local and township bridges were constructed before implements were at their present much heavier weights. In July of 2019, this incident occurred in North Dakota. The bridge damage was estimated at approximately $1 million. There'll be 2 more slides that show this damage. This chart shows the normal legal weight limits increased by 10% and is part of the truck weight education classroom handouts. These charts, without explanation in the classroom projects, can give you a false indication of what actually is legal. As mentioned earlier, if you take advantage of the 10% winter load increase, you must make certain you have purchased enough registration weight to cover the increased weight. Minnesota law allows, for trucks operating within Minnesota, a 4% tolerance of the registered weight. So for example, if you have an M sticker on your license plate, you've purchased weight for 45,000 pounds. The law within Minnesota for Minnesota registered vehicles allows an additional 1,000 pounds or 4%, whichever is greater. In this example, the truck would have a legal registered gross weight of 46,800 pounds, taking advantage of the 4%. For unfinished forest products, the percentage is 5%. Registered weight is a tax fee and not permission to exceed normal gross weights from the gross weight chart. An example would be if you had a T license plate, you've purchased registration for 80,000 pounds. If you add the 4% tolerance to that, you have an additional 3,200 pounds for a gross of 83,200. You cannot haul over 80,000 pounds, the maximum normal legal weight limit, without a permission or a statute to allow it. The winter load increase is such a statute. Minnesota law requires a violator of registered gross weight, which means exceeding the 4 or 5% tolerance, to register to the weight violated, even if it's illegal for them to haul that weight. There are some exceptions for commodities where it's hard to gauge their weight in the forests or in the fields. These are considered first haul. For unprocessed farm products, it's 100 miles, as noted in the slide. And for unfinished forest products, note the 200-mile limit and criteria. In these cases, they do not have to re-register to the violated weight until they exceed 10% of the registered weight. They can still receive citations for exceeding the 4 or 5% weight, but they don't need to re-register unless the weight exceeds 10%. This is an example of the chart indicating what weight limits are allowed on restricted roads. It's part of the classroom handouts, again best explained in the classroom with the work projects to show how these are used. This slide explains the formula used to determine the restricted axle weights. The computation involves using the normal legal weight and multiplying that by the road tonnage and dividing it by 9. It's not intended to be used to determine the gross weights, as the gross weights are a summary of what the axle weights would allow. If, for example, you had a 3-ton road, which is not shown on the chart, you would need the formula to determine what an axle group could weigh. For a tandem weight, you would take the legal tandem weight from the gross weight chart of 34,000 pounds. Multiply that by 3, which is the restricted axle weight of the road. That equals 102,000 pounds. Divide that by 9, and you would find the legal tandem load on a 3-ton road is 11,333 pounds. Note that this sign says axle limit, not per axle. This means the weight would be determined by the calculation we just described, and the weights on the restricted axle weight chart would apply. This is also an example of a 5-ton road with axle weight limits computed by the formula and shown on the restricted axle chart. This sign does not contain the word axle. It would restrict the gross weight of the entire vehicle to 7 ton, or 14,000 pounds. Some of these signs may have been printed in error. This is an example of how a municipality can govern all residential roads with one sign. These are usually on the main routes entering the municipality and would relieve them of posting on all roads individually. The words per axle is usually on older signs. It causes problems as it allows more weight per axle than the formula would allow. Again, the per axle sometimes leads to confusion, as a tandem axle has 2 axles, and if each weighed 20,000 pounds on a 10-ton road, it would total 40,000 pounds instead of 34,000 pounds that the law requires. So it leaves a possible violation of 6,000 pounds. Instead of reducing the weight, one could argue these signs increase the weight. The new sign manual shows the signs for restricted roads using the sign format on the right. They both mean the same, it's just cleaner wording to use the sign on the right. The signs on the left are slowly being phased out. There's only one statute example where consecutive axle loads are impacted by the restricted axle formula. It involves only 5-ton unpaved roads. This is best explained in the classroom training. If this is a specific concern, please contact one of the instructors for an explanation. When road restrictions are in effect for the zone, by default, all public paved roads remain at 10-ton limits, regardless of where they're located. If a road authority wants weights less than 10-ton limits, the road needs to be posted to a lower limit. Without a posting, paved roads remain at 10-ton. Similarly, all gravel roads default to 5-ton limits. No signs are needed unless the road authority wants a different weight other than the 5-ton weight, 7-ton for example. Local road authorities may keep the roads posted after the state roads restrictions go off. It's important to monitor local announcements and road postings. If the sign is up, it's considered to be in force. For qualifying agricultural product, there is a permit available to haul up to 97,000 pounds on paved roads with 7 or more axles. Other than milk, these permits are not authorized on the interstate system. This statute requires a permit from each road authority where the haul is being made, and again only on paved roads. As usual, all road and bridge postings must apply. Normal farm exemptions don't apply to vehicles operating under this permit. The legislature, enforcement, and permit offices needed specific legislation to know what commodities the law covered. This is the statute wording to identify which products are covered by the permit increase. Any further questions should be addressed to the proper permitting authority, be it the state, county, city, or township. The vehicles operating under this qualifying permit need to comply with all of the axle limits on the weight table. They cannot exceed the gross vehicle weight ratings of any vehicle in the combination. You cannot alter the gross vehicle weight ratings once the vehicle is sold. Also, the fees noted here are only the state fees, and the local road authorities may charge similar fees. The permit fee is based on the weight, not solely the number of axles, as some shorter units need 7 axles to haul 90,000 pounds. In that case, the $300 fee would be the appropriate fee. This is what the gross vehicle weight rating looks like for the trailer. If this weight were exceeded, the permit for the qualifying commodities would not be valid. This is an older tractor, but it shows the gross vehicle weight rating for the unit. The gross vehicle weight ratings are treated individually and can't be combined. The qualifying commodity permit allows 90,000 pounds on 6 or more axles. The weights and distances are shown on the gross weight table. It can operate up to 99,000 pounds during the winter load increase. This is an example of a 6-axle truck with the qualifying permit increase. Note it can only gross 87,000 pounds due to the distance between axle 1 and axle 6. It would require a $300 permit on the state roads. This is an example of a 7-axle truck configured to 97,000 pounds. The trailer length had to be extended to get the minimum length of 64 feet needed for 7 axles to gross 97,000 pounds. The criteria is similar to the 6-axle truck in rating, registration, and compliance for proper axle distancing. Note this vehicle is only allowed to gross 99,000 pounds during the winter load increase. This is not the usual 10% increase. Both 6 and 7-axle units have the 99,000 pound gross weight winter load increase maximum. This is the maximum table weight chart as seen before. It's where we go to find out what the maximum allowable weight is based on the truck's number of axles and the distance between them. Note the flip side of the gross weight chart and the numbers in red where the higher numbers are shown. Numbers in red exceed the normal weight limits and require some kind of permission or permit to be used. In 2019, the legislature allowed a 5% increase to all unfinished forest products all year round, as long as the loads are headed for a location with a mill. Prior to 2019, there was no 5% increase above the 90,000 pound permit weight in the summertime. When the statute was changed to include year-round, the 5% language was changed to apply only to loads supplied to mills. Permitted loads were changed in 2015 to allow forest products to be hauled on a short portion of I-35 in the Duluth area. The 2019 legislation made statute changes which allowed the 5% increase in addition to all other weights, including restricted road weights and bridge weights. It even adds 5% to the already increased loads under permit, and the increase is already allowed by the winter load increase. The legislative changes also disallowed any axle violations unless the maximum legal gross weight is violated. If the maximum gross weight is exceeded, the 5% increases are forfeited and the vehicle is subject to axle and gross weight violations. The 5% is above the already increased summer and winter axle loads. This is the list of commodities noted in the statute which qualify as raw or unfinished forest products. This is an example of a 5-axle truck hauling unfinished forest products to mills in the summer, not qualifying for the 6-axle permit as this one only has 5 axles. If the 5% is exceeded, all the weights return to normal legal weights. This is an example of a 5-axle, non-permitted truck hauling during the winter load increase. Again, if the maximum legal weight of 92,400 pounds is exceeded, the 5% increased allowances would be forfeited. The 6-axle unfinished forest products permit costs $300. The power unit is the permitted vehicle and can haul various trailers. Trucks are allowed an additional 5% in addition to the weights restricted by road postings and bridges. Hauling is authorized only on the noted portions of I-35 in the Duluth area. This shows the portion of I-35 that, in 2015, the federal government allowed forest products to travel. These milepost locations start at Highway 210 at Carlton, then go north to the end of I-35 on London Road. The legislation also caps the maximum gross weight to 99,000 pounds, nothing more. The unfinished forest products permit for 6-axle vehicles allow travel from the harvest point to the nearest paved 10-ton road by the most direct route. This route could include township and county roads. This demonstrates what a 6-axle permitted vehicle going to a mill in summer operations could weigh. Again, if the maximum legal exceeds the 5% increase, it will be forfeited, and the violation starts at weights above 90,000 pounds. This is a handout chart available and explained in the classroom training. It shows the summer increased percentages. This is an example of a winter load increase haul under permit. Worth mentioning is the 2015 federal government exemption to haul on I-35 in the Duluth area only allows a maximum of 99,000 pounds, not the 103,950 shown in this example. Again, a reminder of the ramifications if the 5% increase is exceeded. This chart is also explained in the classroom and shows the winter increased percentages. The winter load increase covers all commodities. A 5-axle forest products truck could operate on the interstate when the winter load increase is in effect with the winter load increase permit, same as all other trucks, but it would be limited to only 10%. There would be no extra 5% on top. The 2018 legislature passed a bill similar to the qualifying agricultural increased weight legislation. Most criteria is nearly identical to the qualifying agricultural permit legislation, with one major difference. These products are not restricted to only paved roads. These are examples of the commodity covered by this permit. These are additional commodities covered by statute reference. These restrictions are nearly identical to the qualifying agricultural permit, again, not valid on the interstate routes. These are the requirements for the 6 or more axle vehicle for up to 90,000 pounds. Note that the truck must comply with the truck route requirements. There are provisions for local road authorities to regulate the routes for these trucks. The fee for this combination is $300. Very similar again to the qualifying permit, as the fee is the same at $500 for the 7 or more axles. Note also this vehicle is capped at 99,000 pounds for transportation during the winter load increase. Again, notice the provision for a truck route requirement. This is an example of an actual truck combination built to haul cement. Note the truck was configured on the build sheet to haul more than 97,000 pounds, but when the truck is loaded, it will weigh less and the configured weight will be legal at 97,000 pounds. The construction materials statute contains language which makes it optional for local road authorities to issue a permit. Note the word may. Each road authority must authorize the transportation. A permit from one road authority does not authorize transportation on roads governed by other jurisdictions. There have been occasions where, by mutual agreement, a township may allow transportation on a township road if the trucker has a valid permit from another agency. It should not be taken for granted that this situation applies in all circumstances. Without some legal permission process, the normal statutory weight limits will apply. The preferred route language was added to the statute so industry and the local road authorities could mutually agree on routes. Some local road authorities do not have a permit process, such as some townships. This wording allows an agreement to define transportation in areas which can mutually benefit everyone. It's expected that any type of permission be in writing and contain specific criteria to define the terms and conditions to assure compliance and allow enforcement. This is an abbreviated synopsis of a longer class. Its intent is to offer some guidance until students can again attend the full classroom sessions. Please call or email our support team in this slide if you wish additional guidance. Thank you.